Okay, so take a look at these two pictures. On the left, you've got the Sea of Tranquility. You know, the first place humans ever walked on the moon. And on the right, well, that's in Arizona. Now, be honest. If I didn't tell you which was which, could you actually tell them apart?
But here's the really incredible part. That picture on the right, that's not some random natural landscape. Nope, it's a field near Flagstaff, Arizona. And get this, every single crater you see was painstakingly, meticulously created by NASA. We're talking a perfect one-to-one scale model of the Apollo 11 landing site. So that leads to the big question, right? Why on earth did NASA build a perfect life-size replica of the moon's surface using dynamite? Let's get into it, because the answer is just fascinating. It's the story of one of the most clever training grounds ever built, and it really shows us how astronauts got ready for one of the biggest journeys in human history. To really get why they went to all this trouble, you have to rewind the clock to the late 1960s. NASA was right on the brink of putting a person on the moon, but they were staring down a massive, massive problem. Think about it. The lunar surface was a total mystery, a vast unknown. Nobody really knew for sure what the rocks were made of, or how the craters really formed. What would it even feel like to walk around up there? The astronauts were basically flying into a completely alien world blind.
And their best pictures? They came from the lunar orbiter satellites, and the resolution was, well, about 2 meters. That means any rock, any crack, anything smaller than a car was basically invisible. They could see the big craters, sure, but all the tiny, crucial details they'd need for science and just for finding their way around, totally gone. A complete blur.
And this all boiled down to one critical thing: time. The astronauts' time on the moon was going to be incredibly short and unbelievably valuable. There was no room for error. They couldn't waste a single second fumbling around. They had to be more than just pilots. They needed to become expert field geologists the second their boots hit that lunar dust. They had to know how to spot important rocks, describe weird formations, and somehow navigate a landscape that was totally alien to them. And this is where NASA's brilliant, kind of crazy solution comes in. The logic was simple. If you can't go to the moon to practice, well, you just bring the moon to Earth. So they found this spot near an old volcano in Arizona. It was covered in this volcanic gravel that they figured was a pretty good stand-in for moon dust. And then came the really hard part.
See, they didn't just want to copy where the craters were. They wanted to copy how old they were. And to do that, they used a fundamental geology trick, the principle of superposition. It's actually super simple. It just means that younger stuff sits on top of older stuff. So if you see one crater overlapping another one, you know without a doubt that the one on top is the newer one. It's like a timeline written right there on the surface.
So here's the genius plan they came up with. Step 1, map it out. They plotted the exact location of all 143 craters from their target landing site. Step 2, categorize. They sorted the craters into 3 age groups: old, intermediate, and new. And finally, step 3, detonate. They used these perfectly calculated amounts of dynamite for each crater and blew them up in sequence. They started with the oldest ones first, then the next oldest, and finally the brand new ones. And just like that, boom! They had a scientifically perfect, aged lunar surface right there in the middle of the Arizona desert. Just amazing. Okay, so they built their moon. Now what? Let's talk about the training. Let's see how this incredible replica, which they called Cinder Lake, was actually used to solve some huge and even some totally unexpected problems for the Apollo missions.
So here was the first big test. You have to remember, the lunar lander could touch down pretty much anywhere inside a 5-kilometer circle. So the question was, could an astronaut just look out the window, compare the crater patterns to a map, and figure out exactly where they were? Because if they couldn't, Mission Control would have no idea how to guide them to the really good scientific spots.
So they put a mock-up of the lunar module right in the middle of their crater field and brought in 28 test subjects, geologists, surveyors, you name it. And the results? Well, they were a real wake-up call. On their very first try, using the best map they had, only 6 people, less than a quarter of the group, could figure out where they were. It turned out to be way, way harder than anyone had imagined.
But the test revealed something really fascinating about how our brains navigate. You would think, right, that looking for a big, obvious pattern, like a straight line of craters, would be the easiest thing to do. Well, it turns out, 0. Not a single person found their location that way. The most successful technique, by far, was just spotting a simple pair of craters. NASA figured out that our brains have a much easier time remembering and matching a simple 2-point shape than trying to visualize a complex line from down on the ground.
And the training at Cinder Lake dug up another problem, one that nobody really saw coming: During these practice runs, the astronauts would be describing what they were seeing over the radio to the scientists back in the control room. But it became obvious really fast that just hearing their voices wasn't cutting it. The scientists just couldn't build a mental picture of the complex geology, or even know for sure what the astronauts were looking at. It was too abstract.
So they started messing around with transmitting live video from the field, and the difference was like night and day. All of a sudden, the scientists could see exactly what the astronauts saw. They could collaborate in real time. This breakthrough was so huge, so profound, that it led directly to the decision to broadcast live television from the moon on every single Apollo mission. That iconic TV footage, we have this training ground to thank for it.
So, when you add it all up, what was the real legacy of this dusty crater field in Arizona? Honestly, it's not an exaggeration to say that without Cinder Lake, the scientific success of the entire Apollo program would have looked completely different.
380 kilograms. That is the total weight of pristine moon rocks and soil that the Apollo astronauts managed to bring back to Earth. And the reason we have that priceless scientific treasure, which, by the way, scientists are still studying today to unlock the secrets of our solar system, is because of the intense, hands-on geology training they perfected right there at Cinder Lake. Cinder Lake was so much more than just a practice run. It was where NASA figured out what they didn't know they didn't know. It's where they hammered out the techniques for navigation, perfected the methods for geological observation, and even pioneered the communication systems that turned the Apollo missions from just an amazing feat of exploration into a monumental scientific success.
You know, the story of Cinder Lake is just this powerful reminder that behind every giant leap, there's almost always a meticulous, hidden rehearsal. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, as we're pushing toward new frontiers, toward Mars and beyond, what incredible training grounds are being built right now preparing us for achievements we can't even begin to imagine.